I'm Denise.
She's a non-fiction editor. And I'm Louise.
She's a fiction editor. And together,
we're the Editing Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Editing Podcast. So we have another guest this week. Many of you will know her already, perhaps as the author of the Subversive copy editor. Come on, you know who I'm talking about.
Of course you do. It's Carol Saller. Welcome to the Editing Podcast, Carol. We have wanted to have you as a guest for so long, so we are absolutely thrilled that it's finally happened.
So much.
Well, you couldn't be happier than me. I have listened to your podcast with joy from the beginning, and now I'm tickled to be part of it.
Oh, that's lovely.
Fantastic. So, Carol, we're going to be talking about blogging because it's something all three of us are committed to, and you in particular have a ton of experience. In the unlikely event that people aren't aware of your blogging background, can you give us a quick run through of where you've plied your craft?
Sure. Well, I started in 2010 with a weekly blog based on the Subversive copy editor book, where I wrote advice to copy editors. Then I wrote weekly for the Chronicle of Higher Education. They had a blog called Lingua, Franca, and that was advice for academic writers and students. Then for a few years, I blogged at the website of the Chicago Manual of Style for the section called Editor's Corner. And since 2019, when I retired from the University of Chicago Press, I've written monthly for the Fiction Plus section of the Chicago Manual blog, which is specifically, Fiction Plus is specifically style and formatting advice for creative writers and editors of creative writing.
I love that one. Wow. That's obviously with my specialism, that's a bit of a favorite. I think that's, yeah.
Yeah, what a resume, can I just say as well? I mean, none of your little blogging in a small corner of your own website. I mean, these are heavy hitters, aren't they?
Yeah, I've been lucky that way, yeah.
I think you make your own luck though, don't you, Carol? So, Carol, can we start by perhaps talking a little bit about blog goals? Because Louise and I both think that's really important, and we know what goals we had when we started writing, but what were yours, and what were you hoping to achieve with your blog?
Well, for me, initially, it was just to keep up the sales of my book. And I think that's the goal of a lot of authors who blog. But for you and for freelance editors, they are more likely to blog to attract clients by having a professional looking website where they can display their credentials and lay out the services they offer. And then if they add a blog to that, it can help them show off their writing and thinking skills and give their contact information. And, you know, I think Louise said recently on when I heard you on the Word Chat, you talked about blogging at your website because people kept asking you the same questions, and it was an efficient way to put the answers out there.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people who blog also hope to attract other opportunities. And I know that became the case for me. I didn't even really foresee it at the beginning, but I loved getting invitations to speak or travel or make a little money by consulting. And of course, some people might not have any specific reason for blogging. They just have a lot to say, they feel creative, and they like putting it out there. Maybe they're hoping for fame and fortune.
It is such a great way, though. I mean, just going back to your point there about when you said about it, like helping you have a professional website and laying out the skills you offer, that idea of that blogging is that way of showing rather than telling your expertise. It's such a powerful mechanism for that. Because it's you know, lots of people have pages on their site saying I've done this training, I've done that training, I've attended these conferences, but when you start to write about the things that you edit, for example, I mean, I know you don't have to blog about that, but if you want to show people that you're a competent editor, what better way than to write about the craft of it in some way? It's just such a powerful tool.
Definitely.
Yes. And, you know, we've all seen websites where people kind of fail to do that. And Oh my gosh, if you're not confident that you actually can make things pretty perfect on your website as far as possible, you should hire an editor, I guess.
Yeah. So, Carol, one of the things that we hear people really struggling with is coming up with ideas to write about on their blog so that they can make it sustainable, make it a place that readers want to bookmark and return to. And you absolutely managed to do this. So, have you got any tips for listeners on how to come up with those ideas?
Oh, I do. I have two tips I like to give on generating ideas that aren't, I mean, the ones you always read that are, you should go for a walk or take a shower or work out. No headphones unless you have to have music to think. And those really do work for me. I almost always get an idea when I do those things. But I think my best posts come from, I'm not proud of this, paying attention to things that irritate me.
That's great. That's superb. Yeah.
And my best source for that is browsing on social media, which, as we all know, is highly irritating most of the time anyway.
Which platform irritates you the most, Carol?
Facebook.
Facebook
really?
Does, yes.
Right,
but I can also get annoyed on Twitter. And
That's good to know.
and then before I retired from editing, I also could always find something irritating during a week of editing and corresponding with writers. At some point I would find myself thinking, why don't they understand that? Or why do I have to explain this? So I'm not suggesting that you then write an angry post. And I especially don't mean that you should launch into some kind of snooty lecture or grammar shaming. But if you can identify something that just really gets up your nose, then there are several advantages to writing about it.
Yeah.
First, the odds are good that other people are going to feel that way. And so the topic is going to make good clickbait.
Yeah.
And also, once you start looking into it, you can often learn something that's really helpful and even therapeutic. And you might even change your mind about something.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Point.
And finally, if something irritates you, it heightens emotion. And for a lot of writers, that inspires creativity and especially humor, which of course is a really great thing to have in a blog post. And you probably both know John McIntyre's blog.
Yes.
I mean, he's a good example because he's a master of that kind of blogging from irritation, and he's hilarious.
Yeah.
But he's still always solution focused, which
Absolutely.
which is the key to what you were saying there, because it's about the, if you're gonna it's the criticism isn't enough, is it? It's got to be, that gets up my nose, so therefore I need to show people how to not do this thing that's getting up my nose, and the answer is in the solution.
I think also that point you make about it heightening emotion that inspires humor, it also inspires passion, and I think that passion, if you channel it correctly, comes across. And again, it's that showing that you care about something enough to write about it, that sort of helps to build that trust with your readers here, that this is somebody who cares about whether it's words or punctuation or narrative arc or whatever. They care enough to write about it and explain it, and maybe my writing's going to be safer in their hands than in somebody else's. So I think it's a really powerful sort of trust building exercise when you allow yourself to show that emotion in a sort of controlled way.
And your voice, when you've got that
voice,
a little bit of voice coming across, so and that's the thing, like with John McIntyre's a good example. James Harbeck's another one, but and you, Carol, and Denise, whoever's my favorite blogs that I can usually, I'm not saying I could recognize them if I was given blind copy, but I certainly feel in a space where I kind of feel like I'm, there's an old blog friend, do you know what I mean? Like I feel like I'm in a space that's familiar because I can hear that voice. So what's your second tip?
Oh, right. Okay. So another way to brainstorm ideas is to stop thinking like a seller of something. And remember that blogging is content marketing, which is a soft sell, more like giving away free stuff than selling something. So you're giving entertainment or information or emotional support. And occasionally you might also literally give away a service, a sample of editing or a book or something in order to attract more readers. So if you think in terms of what people need that you can give them, it will help you define your audience. And defining your audience is an essential step in creating that sort of coherent body of posts that will keep readers coming back. And something else I just thought of for an idea, when you're stuck for an idea, is that if you really need a break and can't think of anything, you can consider interviewing someone or inviting someone to guest post.
I can recommend Carol Saller.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, and then finally, I have to add that if you truly can't think of anything to blog about ever, then it's possible that blogging just isn't going to be your thing, and you can try something else.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point for people to remember, because there is such a lot of talk, rightly, in editing communities and author communities about the power of blogging, that I think a lot of people feel panicked if they're not writing a blog regularly, or they struggle because they're thinking, I don't know what to write about. But it may well be that that is not the medium for them, and they should think about other ways of helping people to raise their visibility. It doesn't have to be writing, because I think there's nothing worse than somebody who feels compelled to do something and does it out of duty rather than because they feel strongly about it.
Oh no, yeah.
And it was like kind of on what you were saying when we were on that word chat, Denise, about if you don't enjoy something, why you're never gonna be you're never gonna create content. It's very difficult to fake enjoyment. It can, I mean, some people can do it, but I think I would really struggle to put out a blog post or do this talk now with you two if I was feeling miserable. I just didn't want to do it. I don't think I'd bother engaging, and I think the audience would hear that or read it or see it or whatever. So
I think you have to enjoy it. You really have to enjoy it, even if it means that you have to work quite hard at it. You have to ultimately take pleasure and some pride in it. Otherwise, it's a duty and it becomes a chore, and that comes across, I think.
Yeah, and you two have given, I know some of your other podcasts have emphasized that there are a lot of other ways to promote, and so blogging doesn't have to be the one, and you're all for choosing the ones that you're good at and that you don't mind doing.
Definitely. Yeah.
100%.
It's horses for courses, isn't it, as they say? So, Carol, we can't talk about blogging without talking about blog promotion. And this is something else that a lot of editors do get nervous about, because it means putting yourself out there, doesn't it? And a lot of editors worry that they're going to be seen as a bit arrogant when they promote themselves. So what's your approach to the sort of promotional side of things?
Well, I have to admit that I've had help with promotion from the very beginning that isn't available to everyone, because I was on the team of the Chicago Manual and my book was published by the University of Chicago Press. So the Subversive copy editor has been cross-promoted with the manual to a much larger fan base than I would have had on my own. And every time I blog for them now, they promote the post on Twitter and Facebook and through their email list. And at the end of each post, there's a thumbnail of my book and a link for buying it. So if I were starting a new blog and I didn't have that powerhouse behind me, I'd have to work a lot harder. And the main thing starting out goes without saying, which is to create good content that's really useful and enjoyable to read and that has a defined audience. Then to promote it, I think there are basically two options. And the first one isn't very attractive, which is to pay for advertising. And I don't know a lot about that, but you would presumably start by checking out ad rates in whatever your readers are reading, whether it's literary magazines or similar blogs and websites, industry newsletters, and so forth. And that might be a good thing to do at the beginning. But more usually, and something that doesn't cost anything, is to approach your potential audience through targeted social media. So let's say your target readers are people who need a copy editor. The idea isn't to go on Twitter and just start tweeting, pick me, pick me. The idea is to start building relationships. For instance, by joining those private Facebook groups that are relevant to your content. Like, you're not targeting your friends. You're targeting a group like Ask a Book Editor or Writers Helping Writers, or there are blogs. There are Facebook groups for almost every kind of thing.
Yeah.
So you spend a few minutes each week browsing around in those groups and helping people and encouraging people, and you use your knowledge to answer grammar questions, or you give them a link to a good source. And there's nothing arrogant about that at all. There's no reason anyone should be shy to put themselves out in that way. You're going to look smart and generous and capable, and people will follow you, or you follow someone and they follow you back. And then occasionally, and only occasionally, you post a link to what you're selling. I almost never post a link to my book on social media. In a lot of groups, that kind of direct self-promotion is frowned on or forbidden even anyway.
That's true, yeah.
So, but when I can, I post a link to the Shop Talk blog, and the blog includes a link to the book. So it's the same idea of giving rather than selling, with the goal of building a community of supportive people, so-called friends, who share your interests, who ultimately will help you sell your book or services, or even buy them themselves.
Yeah.
So I think, we could go on for hours about this, but John Asperian, you know him, he's been on your podcast, a technical copywriter, has written a lot on how he built his LinkedIn network. That's where he focuses his energy, LinkedIn. Yeah. And his posts are a good source of advice on that. And there's also a free YouTube tutorial that he did called Getting the Most from LinkedIn. And maybe we can post a link to that.
He's an absolute master of LinkedIn and how, I mean, he's almost made LinkedIn his own blog.
Right.
In the sense that his content is on LinkedIn land, and so, but yeah. Anyway, we can.
Sorry, but I think that's a really interesting example of what you've just done there, Carol. Is an example of when you create consistently good content and you're visible, your fans talk about you to other people. So you've just mentioned John there, and
yes.
And I see this all the time on Facebook groups for editors and writers, and on Twitter. I see it all the time with Louise. When people are asking about, how do I get work quickly, or where do I learn about this, or how do I learn how to market? Louise doesn't need to go and rarely post about anything like that, because other people do it for her. Because her content has become so well known that other people are sharing it on her behalf.
What I would say is, though, I do post regularly.
Oh, you do?
On my own timeline.
Yeah.
But I would never post something in a group unless they had some sort of like carnival, or where that was actively encouraged in a thread. So I mean, I think in groups, the whole idea is being helpful, isn't it? So that and then once that word of mouth kicks in, I mean, that's the slow burn of it, though, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You have to do the work and build that reputation for exactly what you were saying, Carol, about bringing your expertise to the table in some way or other, and then that kind of message getting out, people referencing you when they come on podcasts. That, you know,
well, and something you just said, you used the phrase word of mouth. I've heard more than one freelance editor say that that's where they get most of their clients, from other satisfied clients. So it seems to me that once you get your community started and you start getting work and building on that work, you might be able to give up self-promotion largely. You know, ultimately, it doesn't have to go on forever.
I think that you definitely have to do less the longer you go on, because you and also you've got a bank of content. We'll probably talk about this later, but we've got a bank of content that you can use again and again and again. You don't have to write something and then bury it in the cupboard. And so
evergreen content.
I think the word of mouth thing always makes me a little bit nervous when experienced editorial folk talk about it, because sometimes it can give the impression to the new entrant to the field that it's a marketing strategy, and it's actually useless to the new entrant, because you've got to do all that work. You've got to build that foundation, that community, that knowledge bank, that trust that Denise mentioned earlier.
Right.
Word of mouth doesn't work for the new starter. It works for people when you're later on.
A bit more established. Definitely.
Yeah.
Carol, so when we're talking about, you know, we've talked about promotion, we've talked about advertising, and, you know, the power of, you know, getting your information out there. But what about the more under the hood techie types of promotion? Do you engage in that at all?
Yeah, you mean like search engine optimization? Yeah, I know. Yeah, SEO, it's a huge topic that we probably can't really wade into here, but a blogger should definitely do their homework on learning to use keywords and other kinds of metadata, categories, and whatever their platform allows, to make their sites findable by web crawlers. That, you know, sounds kind of creepy, but and you know, it's not direct promotion, but it increases your discoverability. Once you set it up, it's a kind of passive promotion. So, you know, you choose your keywords and categories, and it allows people to find your posts without you doing anything if they're Google searching. And a lot of you know, one of the reasons there's not a lot of point in talking in depth about it is that I don't know anything in depth about it, but I know it.
You know what, Carol? I don't know that we need to. I think that's the beauty of blogging. I think as just having these basics that you're talking about is enough to get started with for the new blogger.
Well, and it'll be specific to your blogging platform. Yeah. So if you're on WordPress or Wix or whatever, you can find those checklists in your help section. It'll give you the checklist for bringing everything up to scratch. Things like compressing your images so they don't slow down the loading of your site when someone lands on it, or adding alternative text to the images so that unsighted readers will know what they are.
Yeah, and things like having clear headers throughout your post, and thinking about the layout as well, so that people can scan quickly and see, is that paragraph worth reading? Is that answering a question that I'm interested? Or putting social media buttons, sharing buttons, so that you're making it easy to readers to share your stuff.
And I think one of the things that I don't know if irritates me is the right word. One of the things that it always jumps out at me is when people quite clearly spent a lot of time thinking about a really clever heading title for their blog that is meaninless to the content. You know, it's some clever.
You can imagine that showing up in for some bizarre reason in organic search on Google, and somebody thinking that's not in any way relevant to me.
Exactly. I mean, thinking about, you mentioned it earlier, Carol, about Google search. What are people actually going to type into that search bar when they're looking for the information that's in your blog? And does that show up in your title and in your metadata? And that doesn't need to take a lot of time, but it's just, you know, thinking a little bit about these small tweaks can make a difference in your discoverability. You don't need to go down a huge SEO rabbit hole to
No.
to sort of just make small margins of improvements, really, by thinking about how people are going to look for that information, what they're going to ask Google.
Yes,
Yeah.
I always think a clear title trumps a clear solution-based title that's boring trumps a funny, clever title that isn't indicative of what the blog post is about
I agree.
any day.
Yeah, and the $1 million one is one that does both.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. I'm never clever enough to do that, though.
Well, we could talk forever about this kind of thing, but I think it's better, like you said, if people research it online, and we can throw out some resources for that as well.
Sure.
There's a fantastic post at Blogging Wizard on this, and Jane Friedman, she's a really solid resource. She has a guide to starting a blog, so we can put links to those in the show notes.
Great idea. Yeah. And this is where we're going to take a break. We had so much more to talk about on the subject of blogging, so much so that it went on for way longer than we anticipated. Now, there was no way we were going to edit out any of the content, so what we've done instead is split our conversation into not 2 but 3 episodes. So listen out for our next episode, where the conversation continues about all things blog related.